Okay, good afternoon and welcome to another monthly LinkedIn Live with myself and Laura. We will do intros in a second, but just to add, we have a special guest this week for our session and discussion today. Brilliant, people are already arriving and using the chat, so please do say hello, let us know that you're here and join in the comments as we go through the session. If we haven't met before, if you haven't joined one of these sessions, my name is Luann Wise. I'm a marketing consultant specializing, I believe, this kind of T-shaped marketer concept in the world of social media and predominantly B2B as well. So I'm the industry side of this kind of bridging the gap between marketing and industry.
And I represent the academic side. I'm Professor Laura Chamberlain, Professor of Marketing at Warwick Business School. And I'm also joined by an academic colleague today, the lovely Fran. Fran, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks, Laura. So, yeah, I'm Dr. Fran Hyde. I'm Senior Lecturer in Marketing at University of Suffolk. And I kind of moved from industry to academia a few years ago now, but, love to keep my focus on marketing practice, work really hard to sort of bring the outside into my teaching and my research projects. So that's my background. Oh, and I'm very interested in charities and non-profits, which I think we'll be chatting a little bit about today.
We're going to touch on that today. And actually, it's something that all three of us are really interested in, is this, synergy between academia and practice and what we can all bring to the table. So it's really great to have you here today, Fran.
And we'll have more content from partnerships with us all coming up over the next few months as well, because having met Fran at the Academy of Marketing Conference back in July, we're going to be recording a podcast later this month on this kind of topic as well, and working with practitioners. And we've all got workshops at the conference next summer. So this isn't a one-off discussion. This is something that rolls on and on. And so today we thought, very timely, of course, our topic today for discussion would be around brands and how they are responding to the cost of living crisis. It is particularly topical right now. It has actually, been part of our vocabulary since early 2021, but I think, we were in lockdowns at those points. And, costs for food rising at the fastest rates ever. This is about energy. This is about fuel. This is an ongoing situation which is affecting all of us. So this is a topic that we'd love your thoughts on. We've got some examples to share as well. And we'll probably talk for about 30 minutes on the topic today.
Yeah, and as Luann said, we really do want to hear. Luann's got sight of the chat box, but what are you concerned about? What are your thoughts around this issue in terms of both as a marketer, so looking at it from a marketer's point of view, but also from a customer's point of view, because as soon as we take our professional hats off, it also impacts us all as customers in our day-to-day lives. So it is an important topic. And Luann, you just mentioned the C word, the first C word we're going to talk about today. You mentioned lockdowns.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just start off by thinking about the pandemic, because it really does feel a little bit like we've lurched from one crisis into another.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about this session the other day, and I remember reading back in June articles in the big newspapers, so the Times, around the cost of living crisis. So this kind of fear around what's coming or what is here in reality has been bubbling along in the public consciousness for quite some time now, and it's been talked about in the national press. There have been, things to do with the government, and I don't really want to get into a political discussion here. We all know what happened with the UK government very recently. And it is just something that people are genuinely scared and worried about. But I think if you look back to what happened during the pandemic, and I hate to use the word during the pandemic, because I should perhaps say during lockdowns. Maybe I should just say that. There were some real key learnings from a marketing point of view that came out of the pandemic. And lots has been written, and lots of people have looked back and reflected on good examples of marketing during the pandemic. And I think there is something there around, we need to take stock of where we're at now, but we also need to think about what we've already learned from the pandemic. And there were some key issues to do with empathy, to do with authenticity and actually gaining the trust of consumers that really came to the fore during the pandemic. And this was not just about communications. This is also about brands walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And I think there are some key things that we need to sort of think about and move forward with. But it's really down to core marketing principles at the end of the day. And that is about how we add and deliver value to our customers. So at its very essence, we need to understand what's going on with our customers. And for me, this is the most important feature moving forward. I don't know if you have both got thoughts around that. And I bang the drum for customer centricity all the time. But I don't know if you have got any thoughts around that approach.
Yeah, I'm happy to go, Laura, and I've definitely got a few thoughts here. I mean, for me, we always talk in marketing communications about tone and getting the tone right. But I think you're right. We know so much more post the learning of COVID, which is it's got to be about brand values. And actually, you've got to be true and you've got to remain constant. You can't be somebody you're not. And, you know, customers saw very quickly through brands that were claiming things that they weren't genuine or legitimate. And if you're going to be in a space, whether it was, you know, the COVID space or the cost of living space, you've got to be doing that in a very careful way. I've got a couple of thoughts on people I think who've done some interesting work. So in October, you know, the UK Building Society nationwide launched their Conversations campaign. And hotline, actually. It was a campaign put together by VCCP London. And I think that was quite brave because, you know, they're about money, but not perhaps the same conversation people were having about money. But actually, the way they did the Conversations campaign, I think was very thoughtful. It got a lot of comments. I hope the hotline's working. I think that was my risk part for that brand's activity. There's nothing worse. If you're going to have a hotline, you've got to have good advice. It's got to be staffed well. Otherwise, it could do you more harm as a brand. But I just thought that was a really interesting move from Nationwide and you know, perhaps something that people didn't expect to see.
Is the hotline for their existing customers, Fran, or is it for anybody?
No, it's open to everybody. And as I say, I haven't tried calling it. I was thinking that I perhaps should have done that before bringing it up just to see what response you get. I don't think it's been slated on social media, so I think we'd know if it wasn't working. I know Luann would pick me up on that quickly. But I think I just think it was I like that. I like what they're doing with that brand, and I think the positioning of that as a, at the end of the day, you know, they're a for-profit company trying to keep going, and it's tricky time for them. You know, I think we mustn't forget that. But equally, just that was something that I think was useful.
For me, though, Fran, sorry to interrupt you there, but there's something there about the human touch. It's actually about allowing you to speak and discuss your concerns, whether you're a customer or not. And there's something there around the human touch that also became very important during the pandemic. And it's not almost like brand being a facade and there being human beings behind that brand that are invisible. It's actually about the brand having an approach, a human being approach, and recognizing there are people that work behind the scenes in these organizations. And so actually a hotline connects people together in some way. So it facilitates that humanization of what people are doing. So sorry, just a thought that popped into my brain as you were talking them.
Sorry, I think there's something important that perhaps didn't happen pre-COVID, was just encouraging us to talk about these topics and what's worrying us. And, you know, I don't think I've ever had conversations with people in their offices about heating and lighting and, you know, fuel costs of traveling to work and, you know, people working from home and, you know, have you turned the heating on yet? And just actually giving us permission to have those conversations and that it's okay and that we should be talking about it, I think is probably a positive outcome from, you know, the emotional side of everything that we've been living through.
I think absolutely. I think another one just to sort of discuss, which I think is an interesting one, was what the campaign that Shelter ran, which was unusual because it was basically a totally out of home campaign, and I think it extended to beer mats and murals and some specific targeting around party political conferences. But theirs was a kind of subversion of the money saving tips that were being given out, a kind of you have to, have a look at it. It's the creative on it is really interesting, and also interesting because it was an in-house campaign. I know Yonder Media did the kind of coordination of it, but the creative was in-house, which I think, we know brands often know themselves better, and the in-house, I know we share that view that can work very well at times. But I think there was some sort of almost dark humor in this, which was Shelter were being, they're a campaigning organization. Again, that's true to their value, that you would expect them to be calling out policies and procedures. That's who they are, so it fits. But actually there was humor and actually the kind of almost ridiculousness of the whole situation, which is that actually the enormity of cost of living is almost, these little tips are great, but they're not going to help you with a £200 rise in your rent. And I thought that was clever from Shelter. As I say, it's a campaigning charity, but it was good. And the fact that it was, just outdoor. I mean, I'm a great fan of, I know digital is absolutely essential, but there's also a lot of spaces where brands can still talk to people. Petrol pump caps is another of my favourite places, but yeah.
But I think that's a dose of reality as well, right? And I think that when brands are almost saying what everybody's thinking, that's also really important, and not trying to sugarcoat it in many ways. And
absolutely, Laura. Yeah. I think that's what they weren't doing, and that almost brings a brand alongside people, because it's like standing their side, alongside with them rather than preaching at them. It's like, yeah, we get this too. We're thinking what you're thinking.
And it's interesting actually, because the positioning of that is not, they're not trying to sell something, right? So in that regard, they're not trying to sell a product. So it's like, hey guys, we understand what you're going through, but by the way, you can buy this thing. Like, when you're not for profit and working in that space, it's a very important message. But it's interesting how they can play around with that in a little bit of a different way to a company who are trying to sell a particular product. And actually, I think, and again, I'm only talking about it because it's an example that I know about. Organizations that can do something and say something like that are ones really that aren't trying to sell a product in the same way. So Warwick University, for example, have put forward a 3.5 million fund for students, and they have addressed wages. They're already a living wage employer, but they've increased the wage for staff on lower bands, and they're opening out our buildings. So our art centre, for example, is being open to local residents as somewhere that they can come, that's warm in the winter months and things like that. So but again, they're not trying to sell anything per se, and I think there's something there about that space that allows those kind of companies to say things like that and take that approach. Whereas if you are trying to sell a product or a particular service, it does sort of constrain you a little bit, would you say, in that way? And I wondered perhaps if we could explore that a little bit, because I know, Fran, not-for-profit is something you're really passionate about, but I think there's a lot of people that will be working in the for-profit space as well, perhaps listening to this, that are thinking, well, that's all very well for Shelter, but what can we do? I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually there is still a role for escapism. I think, it's interesting. I know we'll get on. We're probably going to talk about the other C word of this, which is Christmas and things. But I think there is still a space for escapism, and I think at the end of the day, people need to go to a different place. And I think it's very hard if you're a luxury brand or a holiday company or a cruise company. What you're selling people is a getaway, is doing something different and getting away from the space. Now, I appreciate for many people the idea of a holiday or a bottle of Dior perfume is not a possibility for the next few years. It may not have been for a number of years, but we do still have some people in the population who have disposable income, and dare I say it, we do still need companies to make money. Oh, gone all dark. I'll just walk around. We do still need companies to make money to be able to pay taxes, so business taxes. So those products do still have to do what they're doing. Oh, I'm not. People in the University of Suffolk will know this is a regular problem.
Yes, our lights often go off if you don't move around in your office.
Yeah.
All our lights in universities, for some reason, it's like a university-wide thing, but they're all on like sensors, so that they turn off when we're not in the room. So if you sit still for too long in your office, you suddenly get plunged into darkness, which is what's just happened to Fran.
Yeah, I'll just carry on walking around. You talk.
Yeah. Well, I will pick up on that C word then of Christmas, because even though we've talked about nationwide as a TV ad, you know, this is the time of year for the big brands and the retailers to launch their Christmas ads. And I did check, there's 39 sleeps until Christmas. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Holy man.
Is that good, or is that not?
I feel really disorganized.
Oh.
That's what that was. That was like,
okay.
oh my God, I've got a 2-year-old who's going to be really excited about Christmas, and I haven't even thought about it yet.
You've got 39. You've got 8. He won't know which day it is. You could change Christmas.
You can't cheat Christmas though. That's a different LinkedIn live, Luann, that you've just said.
Anyway, so I mean, we are seeing the Christmas ads coming out already. Some brands have said that they have done them earlier this year because they know that people are spreading the costs, and some people are starting their shopping earlier this year and spreading those costs. As an aside, there is also a big sporting event coming up for brands to work around, and you know that again could be a whole nother discussion, and we'll park that one. But with the Christmas ads, I think again, Fran, you're kind of the price sensitivity, addressing the issues that are going on, and the escapism. We are seeing examples of both of those with the brand ads that are coming out at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, Chris, whether you're religious or not, in this part of the world, you know, work and education patterns come to a national pause, and there's a sort of interruption to regular activities of life. So I think it's really interesting, actually, that this is going to happen. And yes, we've got an added noise of a big sporting event, which of course is going to make media planning and buying especially expensive. So yes, people went early. I think, you know, before Armistice Day is unusual, but that's what happened because they're trying to get out there. I think, you know, for me, I think there's a lot going on with the Christmas space, but I thought Tesco's were quite interesting because they hit on the idea of Christmas party. Maybe in another few weeks, we'll all have party politics. Perhaps it was good when it came out. We might be a little tired of it. But I think because we have this interruption to national life, their sort of idea about the kind of renegotiating bedtime and when the hell is bin day, I thought was just perfect, because I thought there's escapism there coupled with their price points on a Christmas dinner. I just thought they really got it right. And I thought there was so much in there that, you know, we would say to students, if we were teaching kind of marcoms or branding, that it just worked. And I think it's been really good. I mean, obviously the idea of people partnering up with not-for-profits for Christmas has been going on for a long time. And it's really interesting to see people develop that. I mean, it's pretty brave, I think, of John Lewis to go into the fostering space. I mean, they've partnered up with Action for Children and Who Cares Scotland. So wise, partner up with somebody that knows what they're doing. But there's a lot of people in fostering that would tell you that's very problematic at the moment due to, you know, lack of funding and health and social care. But it's the charity partnership's been going on for so long to give that other tone to Christmas that it's quite hard for brands, I think, to keep finding new charities. And I also think that it's tricky, isn't it? Because, you know, not-for-profits know that at least in COVID, they've had a 15% drop in their income. That's what civil society are telling us. So, you know, Christmas is a key time for them to try and get donations and find partners who again, where the values fit, which is the challenge, you know, to put matchmake these two organisations together. But I am personally pleased to see it, because I think that it's really important. And actually, I wonder whether consumers are I'm almost looking now, you know, who have you partnered with? You know, I think that's interesting now that there's almost an expectation now at Christmas that you will be doing something for somebody other than your shareholders.
there's something there around doing good as well, right? And I think that's really important. And it's quite an interesting situation where you've got a cost of living crisis where we know people have less money, and yet we're asking people to do good and donate to other people. And as soon as you start talking about this, my brain goes to Lad Baby. And the Christmas number one, Lad Baby and Lad Baby Mum, massive influencers in the parenting space. Not everybody's cup of tea, admittedly, but for the last record-breaking number of years, I want to say 4, maybe 5. Yeah. They have had the Christmas number one, and the proceeds from their song has gone to the Trussell Trust. And the way they talk about that collaboration and partnership is incredibly personal. And they have the sausage roll theme, which is a bit of an in-joke with their followers and things, and it is very funny and light-hearted, but the meaning behind it resonates with a lot of people. And I think what's really nice about that is that there's no begging attached to it, and I don't want to talk about donations in terms of begging, but it doesn't feel like you're being asked to do much. You're asked to buy a song, and you know your money's going to a really good place, and you're not spending lots and lots of money. So you're not asking for 20 quid, you're asking for the price of a single, and it feels all manageable. But the money they raise is incredible, and then they do a lot of follow-up as well, so you see the difference that's been made by those donations, and they close that loop really well, I think, particularly amongst their followers, but in the wider piece as well, which is why they broke the record last Christmas about having the most number ones. And things like that. So, I follow them on social media, but I do pay a lot of attention because everybody kind of wants them to do well as well, because they're doing a good thing, and they are influencers, but they're regular people doing a good thing as well. So there's something there about the role of an individual as well as a brand that can be really powerful in that not-for-profit space.
I also think it's interesting, some of the, like you said, Fran, getting the partnership right, but some of the not-for-profits that people are choosing to partner with, like the Trussell Trust, who I support as well, is that they're local, that they can see that they will make a difference within people's own communities, and not negating the large charities that do wonderful work as well. But I think Neighbourly, who I think is M&S or some other charities, and the Trussell Trust, that people can actually see that their support will make a difference within their local communities. I think
you're so right, Luann. And going back to Laura's earlier point about tying in what we learned from COVID into where we take that learning, we absolutely knew. I mean, local was important. We were forced to support local people and businesses, even if we didn't want to, because we were all kind of contained in our local environments. But I think that you're right, and that is a challenge, I think, for national non-profits. And it's nice just to sort of focus a bit on SMEs and local, because obviously what we've talked about a lot is people with very deep pockets and big national campaigns and ad agencies behind them. And we've got a really nice local example going on here where I'm in North Essex, which is there's a Christmas tree recycling campaign that's already been launched so that's the St Helena Hospital pick up trees. It's being sponsored by a garden and tree company. It's often sponsored by one of the local nurseries, and then no doubt it will have a kind of another corporate sponsor. But I think that's local. It's great brand awareness in the local community. It serves a need. Nobody knows if you do still have a real Christmas tree, you don't know what to do with it. The council won't take it away, so it's a way for them to make money. It's a clever partnership, and it kind of makes sense in the minds of the consumer too. And I was having a little look around to see what else I could see that was local, because I think there's other things. There's another I'm on a bit of a garden centre theme, but there's another company called Perrywood locally, and they're doing a kind of buy local and shop sustainably part of their Christmas campaign, and they're concentrating on promoting things that they stock which are local to this part of East Anglia. And I think that's going to resonate really well, because I mean, I feel sorry for, it's not that I'm anti-national brands and things, but I do think it's a shame if we're not continuing what we capitalize on, some of that loyalty and those customers that people and those relationships that local brands built and SMEs.
But because of the geographic nature of local and the fact that proximity to customer means that they figured out a way to add value to their customers. And I think even big national chains, so look at supermarkets, for example, they know the localities that they serve with their physical stores, for example. So there's a lot of things that even national chains in retail, for example, and I know not everybody's in retail, but can think about in terms of how do you add value to your customers. And I think that's, for me, the crossover and where that lesson is. And that Christmas tree example is a lovely one because it's a clear value add for customers. I always donate our Christmas tree and go with the charity pickup in our local area as well. And it's something that's so simple, but I don't know if you've ever tried to wrestle a Christmas tree to case it's a tip or anything like that. The value of having it picked up and doing something good for society is huge in my world. So I'm not wrestling a Christmas tree into the back of a car.
We've
That
had a
could go viral. Yeah, we've had a question.
Well, do you want to? Are you going to pick up on it, Luann?
I'll read it out and throw it to you if that's all right, Fran. Thinking about the partnerships and working with real people, what do you think the value is for brands in advertising with celebrities versus not?
Very tricky. And as I was coming in, I was listening to the storm that David Beckham is currently in with his association with Qatar and the World Cup and other brands and the LGBT community. And I was thinking, I think it's very tricky. I always remember talking to students about Kate Moss and what happened to her after she had her cocaine incident and which brands stayed and which brands left and why. I think it's really difficult, Suzanne. And I think it's, if it works well, but you know, celebrities are humans, and they, you know, you, however much you tie them down, and I know the contracts are now pages and pages, and there's a whole industry of agents that just negotiate. But you know, even use a very small example I have close to home. I work with an organisation. We have a celebrity patron. He's quite famous. Tricky. I think I'm kind of handle with care would be my motto on that. Don't know what Laura thinks.
I would always circle back round to, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? If it is reaching more people through that person's fame because they have a lot of people who are fans or followers, then you know, that's great. But if you want to have a meaningful connection with your customers, and we often talk about relationships and meaningful connections, emotional connections and things like that, is a celebrity the best person to use? In fact, this is why we're seeing micro influencers becoming so important. And this morning I was talking to students about Red Bull. I've been talking about them all week because that's our case study this week. And we're talking about how way back, late 90s, early noughties, they had their campus brand ambassadors, which we now look through the 2022 lens. They were almost the original micro influencers. It was people in a geographic location who were peer-to-peer advocates for a brand. They were not, you know, people from Red Bull flown into campus. They were students who then were given minis with big cans of Red Bull on the back. But it's what are you trying to achieve? What's the connection you want to make with your consumers and with those people? So for me, that's the question. And then you circle round to what kind of person is best placed to be the advocate for what you're trying to achieve for your brand and for what you're trying to achieve. And I think some people can use celebrity as a bit of a band-aid, like, oh, we'll just get a celebrity in and everything will be fine, without really thinking about what the mechanism is that's going to work. And that's why, for me, just circling back around to Lad Baby, that's why that one works so well, because it's so authentic, it's so meaningful, and it's a great example. Now, you could argue they've become celebrities in their own right as well, but you know, for me, that's where I sit on that issue.
Yeah, I think it's all about how you define celebrities, isn't it? You know, if, just for example, the national ITV programme on at the moment that calls itself Celebrities, did we all know who they all were? We probably didn't, and we've got celebrities in our own worlds or in our own client industry sectors that, you know, like you said, Laura, the whole influencers and creators world, I think, is very different as well. We've been talking for nearly half an hour. Again, it's flown by, but we'll try and wrap it up. What do you think, Laura, are your kind of biggest takeaways from what brands are doing right now and what we need to think about post-Christmas?
I think it's customer centricity for me, and it's keeping an eye on the marketing basics. So looking at this very much from a marketer's point of view. I think there's, in times of crisis, and we talk about COVID, we can talk about cost of living. I think there has to be a decision made about how you're going to approach what you're doing as a marketer. Now, some brands are well placed to offer the escapism, to offer the light relief. They can't wade into being all deep and meaningful in terms of, showing that we understand what you're going through. Other brands can do that. So I think it's about having a clear position on how you want to connect with your customers. And some of that might be escapism, entertainment. Some of it might be around support, showing your closeness to your customers. But ultimately, for me, it's about taking a position in how you're going to approach it, and then being consistent and understanding that things like honesty and authenticity and human beings are what drives those relationships. So for me, those are the key things that really ought to be the cornerstones moving forward in terms of thinking about how you present a brand through the different ways in which we do to customers.
Thank you. Fran, anything to add as a closing thought?
Choose your partners wisely. I think we've seen some really good examples of that. I will try the nationwide hotline before I go home tonight. But I just think choose your partners wisely and use them. Choose them for things that maybe they can bring that you could never bring. But if the match, if the match makes and it works, it can be fantastic. But really, really important to think carefully, because I think that there's a great need from the non-profits and that won't be right for every organisation and for their customer base. So you've got to be really careful. When it works well, it can work fantastically.
Yeah. And for me, I think what's really important is just looking at what everyone else is doing to see how they're playing the situation and the conversations and how they're responding. I think it's really good to be able to pick out those case studies and examples and use those to guide your own direction on how you're responding or what you're doing as well. It's useful to look outside your own world. A huge thank you for joining us, Fran. It's been great to have a guest on today. And we have 2 guests next month, Laura.
Yes.
On the 7th of December, we will be back. And because it is nearer Christmas, but more the end of the year, we know that there is lots of trend reports coming out at the moment, lots of predictions for 2023. So next month, we're going to be discussing those and sharing our thoughts with Professor Jonathan Deacon from the University of South Wales and with their marketing consultant and friend Renee Power. So do join us next month as well. Thank you if you watched us live. Thank you if you're watching the recordings, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.